Okay, so you sent us this report from the U.S. Copyright Office, Copyright and Artificial Intelligence, Part 2, Copyrightability, from January 2025.
Hmm.
It's pretty dense. And
Yeah.
you're clearly wrestling with this question that's like increasingly on everyone's minds. Can AI-generated content be copyrighted?
It's certainly a hot topic, and I think the sheer volume of comments that the Copyright Office received on this issue, over 10,000, shows just how much this is on people's
Yeah.
minds. This report is their attempt to bring some clarity to the discussion, specifically focusing on whether a computer can be an author under U.S. law.
So no more monkey selfies then.
Well, the monkey selfie case and that other situation where an artist tried to register AI-generated artwork
Right.
are definitely key precedents here.
Mm-hmm.
The Copyright Office is building on those decisions to say, hold on, folks, if a computer program is doing all the creating with zero human input, it's not copyrightable.
So if I ask my AI assistant to whip up a screenplay and it does no copyright for me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the report acknowledges that most of the time it's not that simple.
Right.
Humans are using AI tools in all sorts of creative ways.
Huh.
Where it gets complicated is figuring out where that line is between a human using AI as a tool and AI taking over the creative reins.
Right. The report makes a distinction between using AI like a tool, say Photoshop or Auto-Tune, versus AI making the creative decisions. It seems to be saying if you're in the driver's seat, copyright still applies.
Right. But the use of prompts is where things get really interesting. You know, those detailed instructions people are giving AI to create things. A lot of folks think a super specific prompt should be enough to secure copyright.
Right. You might think that carefully crafting a prompt like a cat wearing a robe reading a newspaper underwater is enough to claim authorship.
Okay.
But is it really?
The report argues that prompts are more like giving someone a recipe. You're providing the ingredients and the steps,
Yeah.
but the chef ultimately decides how that dish will look and taste.
And even with the same prompt, different AIs, or even the same AI run multiple times, can spit out totally different results. So it's not a guaranteed outcome like baking a cake from a recipe. You're not controlling the specific expression.
And the report uses that same cat in a robe example to drive home the point that you're not really the author of the output, even if you tweak the prompt 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like spinning a roulette wheel.
Yeah.
You have some influence, but you're not controlling where the ball lands.
Okay, so no copyright for meticulous prompt crafting. But what happens when you actually feed AI your own creative work as a starting point?
That's where we get into some fascinating legal territory. The report highlights the Rose Enigma case, where an artist used AI to enhance their own illustrations for a comic book. Copyright was granted, but only for the artist's original drawings, not the AI enhancements.
So it's like I can copyright my new lyrics for a classic song, but I don't own the original melody, a sort of remix situation.
Exactly, and that raises a really important question. What about those who take AI-generated content and heavily modify it, adding their own unique style and creativity?
Can I take something AI made and essentially make it my own, slap a copyright on those changes?
The report seems to say yes. You can likely get copyright protection for those human-authored additions. It's creating a derivative work. Like Midjourney has a Vary Region feature that allows you to remix parts of an AI-generated image. It's almost like collaborating with the AI.
So where do things stand on a global scale? Is the U.S. alone in this focus on human authorship?
Not at all. The report examines what's happening in South Korea, Japan, China, the EU, and the UK. And it seems like there's a global consensus forming around human authorship as the key to copyright. Although there are some interesting nuances, and even a court case in China that bucks the trend.
It sounds like we're in this very messy middle ground with AI rapidly evolving and copyright law trying to keep up.
Absolutely. But the Copyright Office isn't pushing the panic button just yet. They're essentially saying, hold on, folks, we don't need to overhaul the law just yet. We think the current rules are flexible enough to handle this AI challenge.
That must be music to the ears of human creators. The report seems to be saying that your original work is protected even if you're using AI tools in your process.
It does offer some reassurance, but the report also digs deeper into why some people argue for changing the law and why others believe it could actually harm human creators.
Okay, so we've established that AI can't be an author yet, but there are clearly some strong arguments for and against changing the law. This is getting really interesting. What does the report say about those opposing viewpoints?
So we've got this global consensus forming around the need for a human author, but there's also that case in China where a judge went ahead and granted copyright for an AI-generated image.
Right.
It seems like everyone's trying to figure out how much human touch is enough for copyright to kick in. What are some of the approaches different countries are taking?
The report highlights a few interesting examples. Japan, for instance, has guidelines that look at how detailed the prompts are, how many outputs the user generated, and whether there were any edits or additions to the AI content. So it sounds like they're trying to assess the level of creative control the human had over the AI. Did they just throw out a basic idea and let the AI run wild, or were they actively shaping and refining what the AI was producing?
Exactly. And then there's the UK, which has had a law in the books for years that protects works generated by computers, but only when there's no human author involved.
So if I'm a musician using AI to help me compose, I'm not going to run afoul of UK law.
That's the idea, at least in theory. But the report points out that the UK hasn't actually had any court cases yet that specifically test how this law applies to AI-generated content. So even with a law that seems pretty clear-cut, there's still some legal uncertainty.
It really highlights how this whole issue is pushing the boundaries of existing legal systems. We're having to re-examine fundamental concepts like authorship and originality.
It's a fascinating time to think about these questions. Now, with all this emphasis on human authorship, you might be wondering why anyone would even want to give copyright protection to AI-generated content in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we're all basically agreeing that AI can't be an author, why change the law?
Well, the report outlines a few compelling arguments for expanding copyright protection to cover AI-generated works. One of the most persuasive is the idea that protecting AI-generated works would encourage more investment and innovation in AI technologies, which could ultimately lead to new and beneficial creative works for everyone.
So the argument is that by incentivizing the development of AI that can create confection, we're actually opening up new avenues for human expression. It's like those innovations throughout history, like photography and film, that initially faced resistance but ultimately enriched our creative possibilities.
Precisely. And then there's the accessibility argument. Some folks believe that protecting AI-generated content could help people with disabilities to express themselves creatively.
It's like AI could become a voice for those who might not have the physical ability to easily create works of art or music. They could use AI to translate their ideas into tangible creations, and copyright would protect their ownership.
Exactly. Now, another argument for changing the law focuses on global competition. Remember that case in China we mentioned? Well, some people worry that if the U.S. doesn't start offering similar copyright protections, we'll fall behind in the global AI innovation race. A more favorable copyright regime could attract developers and investment.
So it's like we're in a copyright arms race trying to lure the best AI talent in companies.
It's a real concern.
Yeah.
And lastly, there's the argument for simply having more clarity in copyright law to deal with AI-generated works.
Yeah, even with this in-depth report, we're still left with a lot of gray areas. How much human input is really enough for copyright? It seems like a tough question for creators, companies, and courts to grapple with.
It's a question everyone's asking.
Yeah.
And until we have clearer legal guidelines, it's going to be tough to navigate these complexities. Now, these are all valid points for changing the law, but what about the reasons to stick with the current system?
Okay, let's flip the script.
Right?
Why would the Copyright Office hesitate to update the law? It can't just be stubbornness, right?
Not at all.
Hmm.
The report actually lays out some very compelling arguments against changing the law, and it boils down to protecting human creators.
Wait, hold on. We were just talking about how protecting AI-generated works could actually help human creators. Now you're saying it could hurt them. I'm confused.
It does seem counterintuitive.
Hmm.
But the concern is that if we start handing out copyrights for AI-generated content without careful consideration, it could actually devalue human creativity and make it even harder for artists to make a living.
So the fear is that if anyone can create a song, painting, or book just by feeding prompts into an AI, it could flood the market with AI-generated content, making it impossible for human artists to compete.
Exactly. And that's a scary thought, a world where human creativity is drowned out by a sea of AI-generated content.
So it's like this balancing act. We want to embrace the potential of AI, but we also have to safeguard the livelihoods and artistic integrity of human creators.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. And that's why the Copyright Office is advocating for a cautious approach. They want to make sure that any changes to copyright law don't end up hurting the very people they're designed to protect.
It's a measure twice cut once kind of situation. Better to be thoughtful and deliberate than to rush into something with unintended consequences.
Right. And that's why the report ultimately concludes that for now at least, the current copyright system is flexible enough to handle most of the AI-related challenges. They're not ruling out changes entirely, but they're saying, let's see how things evolve before we start rewriting the rules of the game.
So it's a wait-and-see approach. We're in this period of observation and experimentation with AI, trying to figure out how it fits into the creative landscape before we make any drastic changes to the law.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, this is just part two of the Copyright Office's ongoing exploration of AI and copyright. There's still a lot of questions to grapple with, like how to address the use of copyrighted material to train AI systems.
Okay, so we've unpacked the arguments for and against changing the law. What's the final verdict? What does the Copyright Office recommend? So after all that back and forth, what's the bottom line? Is the Copyright Office ready to rewrite the rules of copyright for the age of AI?
Well, the short answer is no. Their conclusion is that we don't need to hit the panic button just yet. They believe the existing copyright system has the flexibility to handle AI, at least for the time being.
Okay, so it's a bit of a relief to hear they're not rushing to change the law, but how do they see the current rules applying to this new world of AI-generated content?
Well, they break it down into a few key guidelines. First, they emphasize that using AI as a tool like Photoshop or a digital audio workstation
Right.
doesn't diminish your copyright protection. Your creative vision is still what's being protected, even if AI helped you along the way.
That's reassuring for artists who are experimenting with these new AI tools, so they can explore these technologies without worrying about jeopardizing their copyright.
Exactly. The report also makes it clear that copyright only protects the human-authored elements of a work, even if it includes AI-generated material. Think of it like a band adding a new verse to a classic song. They can copyright their new lyrics, but not the original melody.
So it's all about distinguishing between the human spark and the AI's contribution.
That's the crux of it. And that leads to another important conclusion. Copyright doesn't protect purely AI-generated output. If there's no human author shaping the expression, there's no copyright to be had.
It all comes back to that fundamental principle: copyright is about protecting human ingenuity. And while AI can be impressive, it hasn't replaced the human element that copyright law is designed to protect.
Now, the report does acknowledge that there will be some tricky situations where it's not so easy to determine if a human's contribution is enough for copyright. It will require a case-by-case assessment looking at the specifics of how the work was created.
So no easy answers then. No magic formula for guaranteeing copyright protection in the age of AI.
Unfortunately, not. The report does state that relying solely on prompts, no matter how intricate or clever, isn't enough to establish authorship.
Right. That might disappoint some folks who thought they could copyright their AI-generated masterpieces just by crafting the perfect prompt.
I imagine so. But the report leaves open the possibility that prompts could evolve to give users a much finer level of control over the creative output. It's an area to watch closely.
Okay, so prompts alone aren't enough, but what about those cases where someone uses their own creative work as an input for the AI, like in that Rose Enigma comic book we discussed?
Right. Well, the report offers some clarity there, stating that you can copyright those aspects of the output where your human authorship is clearly evident. It's like being able to copyright the arrangement of a bouquet, even if you didn't grow the flowers yourself.
And what about those AI tools that let you remix or modify AI-generated content? Can those modifications be copyrighted?
The report suggests that if you take an AI creation and make significant original changes, those additions are likely eligible for copyright. It's similar to creating a derivative work. You're building on something that exists, but your unique contribution is what's being protected.
So it seems like AI is forcing us to rethink the boundaries of copyright, but the core principles remain the same. Human creativity is still at the heart of it all, and we're figuring out how to apply those principles to this new world of AI-generated content.
You've hit the nail on the head, and the Copyright Office deserves credit for tackling these tough questions head-on. They're actively seeking public input and offering guidance as we all navigate this uncharted territory.
Yeah, this report is certainly a landmark moment in the AI and copyright saga, but I have a feeling this isn't the final word on the matter, is it?
Definitely not. The Copyright Office makes it clear they're keeping a close eye on how AI technology develops and are open to revisiting their conclusions as needed. They also plan to issue more specific guidelines on copyright registration for works that involve AI.
So the conversation is just getting started. What's the one big question you think we should all be pondering as we move forward in this AI-powered world?
Here's a thought-provoking question to consider. If AI evolves to the point where it can truly understand our creative intentions and collaborate with us as a creative partner, will we need to rethink our entire concept of authorship?
That's a fascinating question to consider. Could we someday see AI co-authors listed alongside human names on copyright registrations?
It's not as far-fetched as it might sound, but for now it seems like human creativity is still the driving force and copyright law is working to adapt.
Well, there you have it. We've reached the end of our deep dive into AI and copyright. We've explored the legal landscape, the ethical considerations, and the potential impact on human creators. But as we've learned, this is just the beginning of a much larger conversation.
A conversation that we all need to participate in. As AI continues to reshape the creative landscape, we all have a role to play in ensuring that copyright law protects the ingenuity of human creators while also embracing the possibilities of this transformative technology.
So keep those creative sparks flying whether you're using traditional tools or exploring the power of AI. Until next time.